Here we go. I am so excited to be here this morning. Welcome to everyone watching. My name is Darcy Jarrett, and I am here now live with Renetta Hobson, Reverend Renetta Hobson. I'm turning
Good
myself down
morning.
here. Good morning. Thank you for being here,
It's good to be here.
Renetta. We are going to have a conversation. We're going to continue a conversation because we've been chatting, but
hmm
we are going to talk and what we've been focusing on this month, in the month of May, being Mental Health Awareness Month, we have been focusing on and talking to people who have that as a focus in their own lives,
hmm
who live in and have experience in and with and overcoming and working with folks who are overcoming mental illness. So thank you, Reverend Renetta Hobson, MDiv, MS. Thank you for being here with us to have this important conversation.
hmm hmm Good
Yes,
to be here.
thank you.
Good to be
Um,
on with you.
oh, yes, I've missed getting to see you in person and talk to you,
hmm
and so these kind of conversations are feeding my soul as well.
Yes.
For sure, for sure. Well, so Renetta, we talked a little bit, and I've read several times now your book, Waking Up Eve.
hmm
And for me, it has been such a strong voice to hear, to try to tell myself the ways to stay healthy and the ways to
hmm
continue prioritizing my own care and health.
hmm
Can you tell us a little bit about the book for those of us who
hmm
haven't read it?
It's just I would say pieces of my journey, just I would say pre-seminary, but right after I got laid off, that's when I began like this whole quest to find meaning and find more purpose. I believe that I was going through something before I was laid off, but I wanted to get vested. I was like, this little bit of money that I will get, after this 10 years of working and all of this, I'm going to stay put so I can have a retirement. I came from a school of people that, you work for 25, 30 years at the same job and you get retirement and then you go home. So this whole notion of leaving a job where you're unfulfilled, that, you don't do that. You don't take these risks. And I feel that I was pushed out by spirit because that was not where I was supposed to be. I had served for almost 10 years and I gotten great joy out of that, but that was not where I was supposed to be. And so after the layoff, that's when I started writing.
I love that.
And yeah, and kind of, going back through my childhood up until that present moment. And then I take you through seminary and some of my growth and development there, and just a little bit after, and practices that I kind of picked up, and and keeping some of the things from my tradition that fed me, and those things that didn't, kind of letting those things fall away. And so
We
you see some of that in the book.
and we learned so much about you and your own rootedness in your history.
hmm
Do you think part of that is because your grandmother was such a part of your story?
Of course, without a doubt, without saying, and we still have these conversations. I talked to her last night about something that was going on, and we ended up talking about her childhood and some things that she brought um, from her childhood. And as we have these conversations, it's always something that I take away from them. And she's 91, and what was supposed to be just like a brief conversation of me telling her what was going on and listening for the wisdom that she had, it ended up being like an hour and 20 minutes of her just talking to me and me listening. And
Wow.
so even as a child up until, middle adulthood, I'm still looking to her and I'm still drawing on that repository of wisdom. And I'm so grateful and thankful that I still have
Yes, what a great
it.
story. I mean, what a treasure. What a
Mhm.
treasure.
Mhm.
The I was lucky enough to have a long conversation on Monday with my aunt, who's the matriarch of our
Mhm.
family, and
Mhm.
those conversations are it's just so deep. And
Mhm.
to hear about her childhood and about
Mhm.
her experiences.
Mhm.
Wow. Yes, I can see why I've always experienced you as a friend and a colleague as
Mhm.
so grounded and rooted in who you are and where you've been and where you've come from.
Mhm.
This, if you haven't read Waking Up Eve, I would really recommend it, certainly in this time of upheaval. You're writing from a place of seeing upheaval happening and leaning into it.
Mhm.
And it's, yeah, there's so much wisdom in it. So let's talk a little bit about, you have just graduated um, and Johns Hopkins University. Tell us a little bit about um, you find yourself in this time of COVID in upheaval, and you've kind of just come from a period where your life was you were doing
Mhm.
so much. You were doing so
Mhm.
much. Do you want to tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about that period and what you've been doing?
Mhm. Actually, post seminary, and growing up Baptist and being Black Baptist, there was not a lot of opportunity in the Black church in terms of vocation, unless you have like a mentor that's kind of grooming you to kind of take their spot, and unless you're willing to start a church, there's not a whole lot of room there for Black women. Let's just say that.
You
And kind
can
of put a
say
pin
that.
there.
Yes, we'll put a
And
pin in it.
so, yeah. And so with that, um, I was in pastoral care and counseling, and so kind of gotten into chaplaincy because I've, have this call to care give and to provide it in a certain lens and frame. And so after chaplaincy, I kind of thought about maybe a supervisory position, and that door closed. And so I'm at the point in my life where when a door is closed, I'm not going to beat, I'm not going to knock or try to force my way into a situation. I'm just going to pray, seek guidance, and go to the next door that's open. Nothing opened for me here in Atlanta. Nothing, absolutely nothing. I couldn't even get a part time job down the street at a Dollar Tree.
Mm,
So for me, that's okay. You're being pushed, you're being um, driven into this wilderness, so to speak. And when I say wilderness, not necessarily, um, anything bad or any isolation from God, but into the unknown. You're being driven into the unknown, which is kind of disorienting and, of course, scary. And so I packed up everything, flew to interview by invitation with the director of Loyola, and I was recruited heavily into that program. And one semester in, there's this big announcement. The dean comes in. The program is not revenue producing, so it is one of the programs we're going to cut. It was the MS PhD program. And so
I
I
had
began
no
to,
idea. Wow.
yes. And so I began to question, and God, why would you push me out into the unknown and have me be recruited into this program, and all for the bottom to fall out and the program to go away. I
Wow.
put my, but I would guess I would say, like, as a show of solidarity, some of the deans and professors recommended, if you were not that far into the program, there's some other programs available. Um, there's Newman that's nearby, and then There's Johns Hopkins, you can interview there. And so I just kind of put my head down to the grindstone, began to apply other places. I interviewed at Johns Hopkins with the director of their program, Dr. Dave Vines at the time, and I was accepted. So that's how I ended up at Johns Hopkins.
Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
And so many folks, I think, would have been stopped in the time
packed
of
up and came back home.
right, right. And to have those setbacks, I mean, that's even so you've motivated yourself, you've seen and experienced and listened to the spirit tell you you've got to do something different from Atlanta. And then you've moved or been solely totally centered your life on this program in Loyola, which is New Orleans, and then you
Baltimore.
Oh,
Loyola
is in Baltimore.
Yes,
Oh, I'm
yes.
sorry. I'm sorry. It is in Baltimore, and so is Johns
There's
Hopkins.
one. Yeah, there's one in Chicago. There's one in Baltimore, and there's one in New Orleans.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah. And so you started your program was it 2 years ago?
3.
3.
Because I was going part-time.
Wow. And wow. And so since then you've been splitting your time between Baltimore and Atlanta.
Yeah.
Flying to and fro. And you're probably one of the busiest people that I know who is also, and I'll say it again, so grounded and present where you are. So yeah, I want to hear the next book about this experience. But if you were, maybe that's an interesting question. If you were writing Waking Up Eve right now about that experience, what would you draw on? And again, this is a big question, but what would you draw on in terms of the ways that your tools for spiritual maintenance had to change and so much traveling and uprootedness? How did you stay so grounded?
I would say just drawing on the fact that I built up so much resilience in the face of adversity. Just knowing the story of Black women, just reading through some of the slave narratives of Black women and knowing the story of struggle and triumph of Black women, knowing what my ancestors had gone through and what God had brought them through. I used all of that and still drawing on my grandmother who's still here and still present with me. I used all of that to kind of move me forward and to be my inspiration and my courage every day.
Yeah.
Every day. Yeah. A lot of prayer.
Prayer, connection.
Connection. Yeah. And of just being inspired by those people that I know are rooting for me from the other side and those that are rooting for me here. Yeah.
And so we've talked, I would say less than we normally do in these last 9 weeks. Tell me how this has been for you during COVID-19.
I've not had like a moment I wanted my summer to be kind of like, oh, easy breezy. I'm finished with school. I'm going to travel. I'm going to, even if I can't go far, I might just go down to the coast and hang out. And all of that was kind of like, halted. And so I was like, okay, well, what am I supposed to be doing in this time of social isolation or social distancing and quarantine? So what I got in my spirit was just work on yourself, just work on being still, because you've had to travel for the last past 3 years. You've done all of this extensive travel and traveling, every week, during the last leg of it. Just sit still, work on yourself, sit still and get ready for the next journey. And so that's what I've, been intentional about doing. I put a chair in the backyard with this fire pit that I recently built.
Mhm.
I put a chair on the front porch. And so that is what I've not been trying to produce. And if you can produce during the quarantine, great. If you can't, I mean, for me, producing may just be going in the kitchen, baking a cake. My mama gave me, I couldn't be with them at Easter, and she gave me the recipe for a pound cake. So just, things like that, things that kind of, have been feeding my soul, instead of traveling or, being busy outside of the house. I've, just, being here and
Mhm.
doing things like that and being still for the most part. A lot of my days I spend sitting on the front porch watching the kids play and watching the wind blow in the trees,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
that has, kind of sustained me.
Well, I think it speaks to just who you are that you can make that transition and see that so quickly.
Hmm.
Oh, I need to be still. I think I
Hmm.
spent the first couple of weeks of this quarantine really trying to figure out how to be still,
Hmm.
trying to figure
For
out where my
for
priority needs to be.
right, for people who are constantly on the go, and I don't consider myself one of those people, but I feel like the circumstances kind of had me in that pattern for a while, because I like to get out and, kind of see my friends, go see my family and things of that nature. But for the most part, I am okay being at home. Um,
Mhm.
but for the person that is, on the go, that's out a lot, it could be hard to be confound to the house or confined to the house. That can be
Mhm.
difficult. And so, in these moments where you find yourself, I can't get out, I can't go into the office, kind of just look inward and see and try to declutter and see what it is that's, keeping you from being okay where you are.
Mhm. I hear
Yeah.
that. I hear that. And taking delight in the little things, the things
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
I think when I finally realized it, it was it was Amy's birthday, and it was someone was like, "Well, what are you gonna do for her birthday?"
Hmm.
And I was like, "We're gonna be together and
Right.
bake a cake."
Hmm.
And that was like enough for a
Hmm.
birthday.
Hmm.
The pace at which we've been, and I say we, me, culturally, we've been pushing ourselves
Hmm.
is is unsustainable. And
It's not.
I would agree with what you said. Like, I don't consider you to be a person who's like busy. Even when
Hmm.
you were busy, you
Hmm.
were very um grounded. Do you think that helps you in your practice of counseling and sitting with people in their journeys,
Hmm.
their health?
Of course it does. I mean, one of the biggest things that I try to do is try to create a space of calm and safety in the environment. That's the first thing. If your environment outside of the counseling room is chaotic and hectic, you're not going to be able to get the work done that you, may want to get done if you come into the counseling room and it's chaotic and hectic, and you can't, get your bearings or can't get centered or grounded. And so I do a lot of work, around, helping people to ground.
Mm,
Can we just be right here for a moment? Can you just sit for a moment and let everything
yeah.
slow down? you know
Whew, and actually slow your body down.
Body down, yes.
Mhm.
I do a
Doing
lot
some
of,
breath work.
deep breathing, yes, a lot
That's
of breath
it.
work, yeah, to, slow people down. And those,
Yeah.
it's practices that I've used and that I know are, research based and that they work.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Physiologically, they slow your
Hmm. They
whole
slow you
system
down.
down. Mm. Mm. Well, I
Eh,
might maybe we could practice one of those
mhm,
toward the end of our
mhm,
time together.
mhm.
Thank you so much again for being with us. We see some folks that are watching and listening, and Naritha's getting a lot out of it. And so, hey,
Good. Hi,
Robin, and
Naretha.
hi,
Hey, Robin.
Michael,
Hey,
Mike,
Michael.
and so thank you again for being here.
Mhm,
I think it seems obvious to me, having known you I think we began to know each other right after your seminary
mhm,
experience.
mhm,
Um, and so that's been a couple of years now, but knowing you now, it just seems so obvious that this is the call on you,
mhm,
that you
mhm,
are a person that can sit with people
mhm,
in many states of wherever they find themselves, right? Um,
mhm,
but people come into counseling oftentimes, you know, in this moment of crisis, and so I can just see that your presence, and I know that your presence is so comforting to them.
mhm.
Do you want to talk about, yeah, so you were saying for your own practice, sitting, stillness, observing,
Mhm,
lots of prayer, is
mhm.
there anything else you've been using during this time to
Um,
get you through?
Most of the resources that we have available now are going to be virtual, but there's so many things virtually that you can engage. There's like art museums. I use like something. It's an app called the Mindfulness Coach. It's kind of like guided meditation. YouTube has a bunch of videos. They have the guided meditation, and then they just have the music. Sometimes I'll play those. Sometimes I'll light an incense and a candle or something like that, just to create peace and serenity in my environment. And that works beyond measure. And if you're, like a mother, or you have your guardian, father, or the parent of children, and someone is there in the house with you, take some time, even if it's in the bathroom, take you a few minutes to get away, light your candle,
Mhm.
and run you a bath, make you a bubble bath. There are so many, things that you can do that we don't think about, just
Mhm.
right at home. Something my mother has done, that my mother does, that I've kind of picked up. She works in a garden and does yard work. And I never saw myself as a person that, was really into yard work and stuff. But I recently planted like a rose bush and a few trees, and that was therapeutic for me. So it's things that you can do in your environment.
Mhm, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I always kind of joked with myself and said, "Well, I'm not a yard work person." I did a lot of
Right.
yard work for and on behalf of my mom growing up. Love you,
Mm-hmm,
mom.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And a lot of weeding, a lot of weeding.
Yes. Yeah.
But my spouse and partner in life is, and doing that kind of stuff really has been
Mhm.
lovely, lovely.
Mhm.
And sometimes, for me, it's everyone's outside. My allergies have been really
Right.
picking up.
Yeah.
So I'll be kind of on the porch, and I'll bring
Mhm.
out my paints and my
Yes.
canvas, and I'll
Yes.
be doing my thing while they're doing their creative thing.
Mhm. Mhm. And you'll be surprised if you have children. I don't have kids, but I want one. But if you have children,
Oh, you'll be such a good mom.
if you have children, you'll be surprised how enriching that is for your children or your child to be outside with you. I mean, some people pre-corona had not taken walks with their family in, I mean, months, maybe even years. Now this, being in isolation or quarantine has kind of gotten families back into the pattern of walking together or going outside and doing things together. It's a great way to connect, and it's also therapeutic.
Oh,
Um,
it really is.
yeah, I see parents in the neighborhood with their kids walking, kids playing on the sidewalk with chalk and, little things like that. It's so much you can do within your own environment. You don't have to go out to find joy, meaning, and fun and things that feed you. You can do those things at home.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We have well, we're kind of outside folk anyway, but um,
Hmm.
being outside has been just the calming force
Hmm.
in the household, and we like to we let our son make this huge mud puddle in the backyard, and I
Hmm.
swear it's endless amounts of fun and
Hmm.
hours of just getting dirty and doing the things
Hmm.
that that maybe kids who grew up in a more rural setting could
Hmm.
experience, but
Hmm.
maybe not folks who than kids who are growing up in the city.
And then if you're
Yeah.
not an outdoorsy type person, you can come back inside and find things to do. Crafting. My little niece has, my mom put her together a crafting kit, and she comes over and spends time with my mom, and she'll pull out her crafting kit, and she's made mugs and things like that. There's stuff that you can do to engage children, and that you can do to engage yourself during this time of quarantine. It doesn't have to be all about work. It doesn't have to be all about, and I know people have faced, with the layoffs and stuff, it's
Mm.
hard to kind of focus on being well and doing things that feed you during the time. But in the book, I talk about my first layoff and how I staved away some depression by engaging with community and doing things like walking. And if you not like, again, if you're not an outdoorsy person, get you a stationary bike, or there's so many things online. If you have internet, you can exercise with people on the internet. Or the key is to not to sit and languish in what's going on. There's a space for that, to sit and to hold what you're going through. There is a time and a space for that.
For lament and for, yeah, of
Yes,
course.
make space for that. Make space for your grief,
Hmm.
but find the resources to kind of engage yourself and get back into not just this whole grind and being productive, but get back into life, get back into living.
Yes, and
And the
there's
reason I talk about it in the book is because I went through that job loss and losing 100% of my household income, and having to navigate those waters and get through that. And to me, it's the same sort of thing right now. And there was just a couple of nuggets in terms of surviving that and getting through that in the book.
oh, absolutely. For me, I've been reading your book. And actually, that's probably where it is. I wish I had my copy in front of me. It might be on my stationary bike on the porch, but
Hmm.
each time that I have, I've begun reading it again, picked it up, I have been motivated to be doing some kind of body practice and
Hmm.
during that time. And so, yeah. So, what are the ways that we can train our own inner voice to encourage us? I feel like that's what you're doing in the book. It's like you're
Hmm.
recognizing your own voice that's self-defeating,
Hmm.
and you're
Hmm.
replacing it
Hmm.
once again, because I think you
Hmm.
are, I mean, that's your voice as well, the positive
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
voice. But and so the even maybe the act of writing this book was a way for you to reclaim
Hmm.
that voice
Most definitely.
of positivity.
Hmm.
I love it. I mean, I really had some beautiful images that just stick with me from it of and I personalized them for me, but things that I thought about while reading it was just like the healing that can come from taking care of myself, that I'm taking
Hmm.
care of that little me.
Hmm.
And I loved how you described you as a little person. I just wish I
Hmm.
knew that little wise human. Um, yeah. And
Hmm.
so something I thought of when you were talking is just about this journey that we're on right now. And And how would you, let's say during this time, someone has not sought counseling out, has not um, sought that type of help, what would you say to that person? I know that there is just so much stigma out there.
It is.
Um,
And I kind of just had this conversation with my grandmother last night about therapy and how, and my grandmother and my aunt, and how, especially in the African American community, we need to normalize mental health care
mhm,
and seeking therapy because it is a resource. I would not provide it. These were the words I used. I would not be in a field and provide something that did not work.
mhm,
Full stop. Especially in the African American community, it's so much stigma and so much ignorance around mental health care. We tend to think within the community, and it's not everyone in the community, but
right, of
based
course.
on the things that I've heard and learned, it's you know it's oh, counseling is for people who are psychotic or actively in psychosis. No, it's not. That's a piece of getting better if you're in active psychosis. But counseling can help you manage daily stressors, things that may come up in your life that could be triggering, so that you don't have episodes of active psychosis, or so that your mental health doesn't worsen. I mean,
Mhm,
something as common as anxiety is a mental health concern.
mhm,
And there are millions of people that suffer through anxiety, and it's comorbid. It exists with depression. And it's like a dirty word. We don't like to talk about it, but a lot of people suffer through it. A lot of people suffer with it. And counseling is a resource. And even now, I recommend counseling to people because it's so accessible. It's like even in the midst of COVID, you don't have to leave your home to get it. You can go on the screen
mhm,
and talk to someone. I mean, there's so many um, ways to engage counseling and to sit on the therapist chair. And it's not this, millennials and Gen Z, they're getting it. They got it.
mhm.
But it's like, previous generations, it's still like this thing that's taboo. I think, for me, I said it's the new sexy to be mentally well, to take care of your
Yes.
mental health.
I love that. We need to put that on a bumper sticker. I love the
That is
bumper stickers that say reading is sexy. We need one that's
yeah.
like therapy is sexy.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's so attractive to be in the presence of someone who really knows himself.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm. And, talk about in an age of adulting, it
Hmm.
is the way to ensure, your my own future is to care for myself right
Hmm.
now.
Hmm.
Um,
And so many people try to engage into relationships and the sort, and they're not mentally well, and they, kind of wonder why the relationship goes south or why it's toxic. It is because one party may be mentally unwell.
mhm. Absolutely. And we talked about the church's role. Both of us are
Hmm.
clergy. So we talked last week with my conversation with Liz Hutchinson. Shout out to Liz.
Hey,
Um,
Liz.
hey Liz. And they were talking a lot about messages that they received in Christian community growing up that
Hmm.
said, well, that what you need to have is more faith, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And in our conversation, I've heard us both agree, and I think this is so true, that prayer is important in the
Hmm.
process of becoming
Hmm.
well. Um, and also seeking outside help, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Tell me if this is a way that you've kind of thought about it. And this is a way that I've definitely heard it spoken about in 12 step community. But when it comes to thought patterns that are negative, right? Which, I think are associated with depression and with
Mhm.
anxiety. Those thought patterns come from within, right?
Mhm.
And so it's really almost impossible to interrupt those thoughts in unto oneself,
Mhm.
um, successfully, let's say. But instead, we need an infusion of other ways of thinking that
Mhm.
can help us overcome those negative thought patterns. And so that's,
Mhm.
as I understand it, um, all of the steps that we take towards self-care and mental wellness are, for me, a way to interrupt that negative thought pattern and to replace it with a positive one. But those things don't just happen in unto
No, they
myself
don't. Yeah.
necessarily. I need help
No.
with that, right?
Yes. It's like with anything else that you don't know how to do, or any other habit or pattern that you've learned that's counterproductive, that you need help unlearning. And I'm a college football fan, and I sometimes use like football analogies. It's like running an audible.
Hmm.
You're
Tell me
changing the
what that
game.
is.
You start out with one play, but you see that the defense has read your play.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And so in order to move the ball forward, or to get closer to your goal, sometimes the quarterback will call an audible, and
Hmm.
that kind of shakes things up. It's an interruption, and then you reset for another play.
Mm.
So it's kind of like throwing an audible by getting someone to help you to unlearn and relearn healthy, unlearn all of these years of negative, thoughts, negative thinking, and negative patterns and negative coping, and relearning. You're throwing an interruption. You're running an
Hmm.
interruption. You're calling an audible.
Calling it audible. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm yeah, my family, if they're watching, will probably give me
They'll
cancer
help
about
you out.
not knowing
I know what an
that
audible is.
terminology.
Well,
Um,
I mean, I grew up in Alabama, so it's God and football. So,
yes, yes. I'm thinking about um so we talked a little bit about anxiety. Um let's talk about the ways in which, I mean, it's been 3 weeks and we've heard of 3 murders of
mhm,
of black folks
mhm,
by police.
mhm,
I mean, the anxiety that produces within me
mhm,
is intense.
mhm.
How, maybe just start with what we've kind of already talked about offline. How are you able to cope? What have you found are ways to cope amid this craziness in
Mhm.
the news cycles that are, um, yeah, anxiety.
Living
First
in
producing.
Baltimore, and I'll take it back. Um, Post Freddie Gray,
Hmm.
um, it was kind of anxiety producing. I had a police officer, and I lived in Towson,
Hmm.
and it's not a lot of diversity in Towson. It's a lot of white people, and it's not a lot of black people. And I had this police officer trail me for about 2 miles, and my heart began
Hmm.
to race, and I was just overcome with this intense fear. Like, what does he want? Why is he trailing me? And
Hmm.
at some point, he turned off. But it's this whole notion that, I'm in Baltimore. Freddie Gray had problems with the police here, and this living in this whole thing where police officers are um, murdering people of color and black people in broad daylight with little to no consequences can be anxiety producing.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we just have to do the best that we can. I talked about that. I debriefed with some other counselors in a group after that experience happened to me. I don't think you should sit silent. I think you should speak. I'm an advocate for, telling your story, to reclaim your power, find somebody to talk to. Also, to talk to a therapist. talk to your friends about it, your church members, somebody. Don't hold
Mhm.
it in. Don't hold, because when you hold anything in, it festers. Anything negative, it festers, and it can become this large issue that you're not able to kind of work through and cope. It's more systemic issues. It's more of a systemic issue, and I feel like we have to keep fighting and keep protesting and keep pushing legislators to make tougher penalties, tougher laws. And for people who killed, it's like these, the 4 cops in Minnesota they've been fired, but they hadn't been arrested.
They hadn't been arrested, right?
Yeah. Until there's, a no nonsense policy on this type of behavior, it's not going to stop. But how do we care for ourselves during this? Um, Communal lamentation, connectivity, talk, communicate,
Mhm.
um, talk to a helping professional.
Absolutely.
Because it's depressing and it's sad. And to say that it isn't is to be in denial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to say nothing and
And to
shut that
say,
down
yeah,
is
that's creates suffering. It just creates more suffering.
mhm. So that coupled with, I mean, I just think there's so many layers to all of it, but um the stigma that exists in many communities, and like you said, in African American community, about seeking help from a professional, that along with standards and ways uh, of viewing either hyper masculinity or what it is to be masculine, in a society that emasculates, people, men of color particularly,
Mm-hmm.
all the time. um, there's just so many ways in which there's just so many barriers,
Mm-hmm.
barriers to getting help, and I'm hoping that Mental Health Awareness Month and having conversations like this one, um, allows people at least a starting point to say,
Mm-hmm. It's
you know,
okay.
it's okay,
Get you some help. Yeah, it's okay.
get help. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
um and yeah, I mean, we already talked about this, but saying this, I'm not trying to make this conversation about what I think other folks
Mm-hmm.
should do,
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, but particularly with the story of Amy Cooper, you know, and white women and
Mm-hmm.
our role in perpetuating violence against Black men and Black communities
Mm-hmm.
by extension. Um, yeah, there's so much work that needs to be done. There's so
Mm-hmm.
much work.
It's work to deconstruct that whole notion of white privilege that she's trying to protect, and what it has done and how it has destroyed the our community. I mean, the whole
Mhm.
legacy of white supremacy in this country and what it has done and how we see that play out on a day-to-day basis. I mean, all of that is enough, um, to drive us to the point of insanity. But we have to be vigilant about our own self-care and our own mental health. We just have to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were talking about, and I, since our first conversation, looked a little bit, about the woman Carolyn Bryant Donham, who was the person who accused Emmett Till, the
Mm-hmm.
14-year-old Black man, of whistling at her. We all
Mm-hmm.
know that Emmett Till, had a speech disorder
Mm-hmm.
and was using his coping skill in order to be able to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And so how the legacy of white women is perpetuating violence
Mm-hmm.
against Black men, and how do how do I live within that? I'm a female bodied white person?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, how do I live with the anxiety and guilt of that
Mhm.
being my legacy, because it is,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
the legacy of Christianity being one that says, that uses theology against people of color, and that I
Mhm.
think has fully embraced empire and white supremacy, and so negating that and refuting that at every level,
Mhm.
is,
Mhm.
oof,
That's the work of the
it's
white
big.
community.
It's big.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
That is the
Absolutely.
work of the dominant culture. That is the work of people who procure and hold power. The work of the white community is to deconstruct and decentralize their power. That is
Hmm.
the work.
Hmm.
That is the work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I follow this group called White Homework, and
Mhm.
it's all about that. It's um how do we continue to deconstruct systems and structures
Mhm.
of power, and you know deconstruct bias.
Mhm.
This person, Amy Cooper, yeah, I don't know if she would have felt like she had bias before this
Mhm.
event. So um I'm not saying that to be another one of the voices condemning her, but I just say that to say what is my own bias.
Mhm.
And if I'm not seeking mental health recovery, then I don't know myself well enough to
Mhm.
know if I have bias or not. And
Mhm.
and um, yeah, I think that's the tie-in for me in terms of mental health.
Mhm.
But yeah.
The ways in people put the ways in which people position their bodies, even occupying space or cutting people off. If you are not aware of those like basic, those subtleties, those little nuanced areas, then of course when it becomes when it's something systemic or something larger, then of course that's going to, oh no, this is how it's always been. This is what it is, and you're not going to punch holes or poke holes into something that you do not view as fundamentally flawed. And it
Mm,
is fun. The system is fundamentally flawed from the inception. It was flawed.
hmm.
That Black people were not considered whole individuals. It is flawed. It is
Mm,
flawed. And so until the white community is able to accept that and do the work of transforming the system, then we will continue to live in the consequences of that system, of that broken system that's broken for everybody. How is it that I can be okay if I'm flourishing, I'm doing well? Barack Obama said it in his commencement address to the class of 2020.
mm,
How is it that I can be well, be okay? It doesn't matter what I earn if everyone around me is sick and poor.
mm.
And so, the white community has to sit with
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, and how do we? I mean, I love the way you talk about, and this is, pervasive in Black religiosities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, talk about the ancestors and the support that the ancestors bring and give to you.
mm-hmm,
And it was Reverend Keith Menhenick, who preached at the last week of February,
mm-hmm,
so right before all of this, but asked the question, how do we reconcile with ancestors that didn't create a
mm-hmm.
legacy
That
um,
you can be
that
proud
we
of.
can be
Yeah.
proud of, right?
Mm-hmm,
And that's work to be done, personally and in counseling. And I love the way you just said it's in it's in the minutia and it's in the system.
mm-hmm,
It's in the everyday contact, the way
mm-hmm,
that white women will never yield space on a sidewalk or hold a
mm-hmm,
door,
mm-hmm,
um,
mm-hmm,
and certainly not for Black women.
mm-hmm,
And breaking that down, within myself, and within ourselves is just a beginning, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Mhm.
mm-hmm.
Mm. Renetta, you have such a way of communicating, that is just so beautiful and uh, comforting to me as your
Thank
friend.
you. I just, want to be able to. I've heard this analogy, or I heard it put this way: I'm just a beggar trying to show other beggars where we can find bread. And I
Mm,
think that is how the world should be, to create a more excellent and a more just way.
well, you are certainly the example of that, and the example of the way of grace.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Thank you.
so, yeah, I thank you so much. Is there
Yes, it's
anything we
been a joy
haven't talked
sharing with
about?
you.
Oh,
It's
is there
been a
anything we
joy.
haven't talked about that you thought, oh, when we first spoke about this conversation that you thought you wanted to say or share?
No, I think I've covered everything.
You really
It's
have.
there's always opportunity to share, and to come back again and talk,
Absolutely.
as we kind of figure everything out and work our way, um, through what things will look like post COVID,
Hmm.
post Corona, and how we kind of maintain connection through it all and be well through it all.
Absolutely. And let this
Yeah.
time change us
Just, yes, for the better.
for the better and
Yeah.
growing. Yeah, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
I'm always trying to get you to share our open pulpit with us at Park Ave. We're
Mhm.
so blessed when you do and when you're there and present with your partner. And so thank you. Thank you for all that you do.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
um so glad to get to have this time. I appreciate you.
Yes. Yes, I appreciate Park Avenue and the space that it is curated for oppressed people and folks on the margin, and sharing space and carving out space.
And thank you for taking time and carving out time for this talk this morning, or this afternoon. I hope that you continue your peaceful wellness on this rainy day in Atlanta. Is it raining over
Yeah.
over where you are?
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
been drizzling.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. I look forward to talking more to you offline.
Yes. See you then.
All right. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye. This time has been our final of our 4 interviews for Mental Health Awareness Month with Park Avenue Baptist Church. My name is Darcy Jarrett. I appreciate all of you who tuned in and who will tune in later. Thank you. We want to end this stigma, and conversations like this, open, honest sharing, is a way that we think we can uplift that narrative to end the stigma of mental illness and counseling and the need for that in our culture today. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a blessed day.